Hi, this is Kim Hammer with your morning devotion taken from the book of Ruth, chapter 2. Have you ever started to do something, maybe made plans to do something, and it didn't turn out exactly the way that you thought it was going to turn out? Well, that's a common experience in life for many people. We find that when you take a look at Ruth chapter 2 and verse 3, it has a neat little phrase tucked away in the middle of it that applies to a lot of us. It says, as it turned out. Naomi and Ruth had found their way back home, and now the reality of the fact that they had to take care of their needs and find provisions to live by had kicked in. One of the neat things that God did was when he told man to write the law, he included in the law a portion that said that if you own a field and you have your harvesters out there gleaning the crop, that they were required to leave behind a certain portion so that if strangers were passing through, they would be able to have something to eat, or the needy in the community, if they needed something to eat, they could go out in the field and they could glean it themselves. A little side note here, God didn't create the welfare system, he created the work system. And he made it provisions, or he made it allowable where provisions were available to those who were hungry enough or wanted to work hard enough to be able to go out and to find what they needed in order to sustain them. That was the common work ethics of the day of which we're reading about. But we find that Ruth and Naomi determined that it was time for Ruth to go out into one of the fields and bring back the provisions so that they'd have something to eat. Now, Ruth could have picked any field that was out there, but the one field that she picked was owned by a man named Boaz. And so now as we begin to understand the story and see the story play out, and we think about that little phrase tucked away in verse 3, as it turned out, we begin to realize that God had a master plan. Things had not worked out the way that Naomi and Ruth had planned, but things were going to work out exactly the way God had planned. As it turned out, God had them exactly where they needed to be, exactly when they needed to be, where they were, and in a position that God could reveal what a great Redeemer he was, and that he was going to meet their needs by leading her to a field that was owned by one of their kinsmen redeemer. As it turned out, everything was going to work out because God was in control of where they were going to go. You know, sometimes when things don't work out the way that we think it ought to work out, or we find ourselves in the middle of a situation where it's not turning out exactly the way we want it to turn out, maybe we need to think about Ruth and Naomi in that verse 3 where it says, as it turned out, and realize that as long as we were willing to trust God, everything is going to turn out all right. How do I know that? Because Jeremiah 29:11 says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. That's exactly what God was going to do for Ruth and Naomi, because as it turned out, she was in the field that God wanted her to be in. If you'll trust God, it will turn out exactly the way God wants it to turn out, so he can bless you and he can prosper you.